Cyberlenium by Daniel Brian Mobley. Read by Claire Glover. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 11. We have elected you, our beloved gamers, the children of a new age. The world is, now and forever, your playground. Hanzo Nagatomi, CEO of OmegaMe International. 120189 Samus Garden Village Homes, 10:02 p.m., San Diego, California. December 30th, 2054. Jason Cord could no longer remember how long he had been inputting code into his phone's slivstreak. He droningly tapped and dragged his finger across the screen, the device clinging to the top of his forearm like a 20th century sticker from a 6-year-old's coloring book. With the completion of each new communication of code, his finger dragged again and again, instantly filing that code in its designated folder, a single stitch in the ocean fabric of system space. The sweat surfacing on his coffee-brown skin, both old and fresh, was a pantomime of his pastime, passion, and profession. Then at once, he paused to push the parade of bronze dreadlocks away from his face. How long had he harrowed over this labor? And that was when he noticed there was much less light in the room than when he had started. Jason spun himself around in his Sweeney OS swivel and peered through the clear glass square of his operating room door. Not a lick of light grinned back at him. He then slowly spun himself in his chair, not saying a word. How long? The operating room had struck again, a devourer of time. It was his literal and personal think tank, a place of meditation, dedication, and inspiration. Yes, much inspiration. As founder of Hi-Res Inc., one of the best and fastest-growing video game developers in North America, Jason had developed many a brilliant idea in this room. While the gamerheads preferred to believe in magical epiphanies and miracle acts of genius, the blood, sweat, and tears of reality, ironically what brought about the fruition of gamerheads' fantasies, happened in this room. A stone-cold, tacit dwelling that more resembled a 20th century prison cell than it did the utopian womb of wonder most believed it was. While the average developer's workspace consisted of pacifier tools, obsolete consoles, waifu miniature statues, and vintage posters of Jumpman, Jason believed sparse materialism gave space for true creative evolution, avoiding indulgent imitation. Only functionality was allowed to enter here. The pause in labor seemed to finally allow Jason's body to feel the strain of duration. Days without a decent meal or proper hydration. He sagged in his chair at once. How long? Too long. The price of success. He reluctantly powered off his slivstreak. Goodbye, Jason, it chirped in a crisp, feminine voice, its screen fading. Jason stood to his feet, stretching. The room was indeed small, and his fingers scraped the low ceiling as he stretched. It didn't help that he was almost 6'4". He nearly considered staying there another day until he felt the 5 o'clock shadow on his face. Shuffling to the door, he mumbled, "Open," and the steel door did as it was commanded. The living quarters of 120189 Samus Garden Village Homes were, however, much less grave than its operating room. "Lights," Jason said, a bit more clearly. With a whispered whir, clink, and a couple of steps, he was in another world entirely. A spacious living area sprinkled with feng shui-friendly furniture, panther fur carpet, frost-framed montage posters of iconic gaming characters dating back to the 1990s, and a lunar-themed vaulted ceiling above it all. The room sported many a healthy window, the crisscrossed architecture of the neighborhood houses visible. A 72-inch Ambrosia Webmonster XL hung mounted to the far wall on his left. Breathing in fresh air, he spoke to it. "Webmonster on, volume 22. The WebVision set hummed to life, its screen lit up with black noise. Jason walked past it without a glance. Channels at 64, 19571, 360, and... He had made it to his bedroom doorway, pausing before he decided on the final channel he wanted to stream. At Play 2K, please. Stream from all rooms except operating room. The screen was suddenly divided into a 4-squared grid, the respective channel codes present within each square. Then the grids were filled with web news imagery, the four together creating a collage of visual and auditory information from both the gaming world and the real world, just about one and the same. As Jason moved into the bedroom, another Web Monster XL on the wall a few feet away began its broadcast. The audio was jumbled gibberish, a smattering of voices echoing throughout the room, the house. With the start of overwhelming sound, Jason's head began to ache. Recalibrate to volume 35 and put 4-grid sound on a 1-square, 2-minute rotation. Random. After his command, the gibberish ceased. The top left panel grew to the entire size of the screen, hiding the 3 others from view. As an image of a pretty Japanese newscaster sharpened into focus, Jason promptly removed his tank top and jeans, leaving them on the bedroom floor. He moved into the master bath as the woman's voice, speaking Japanese, began to emit from the web monster. Language English, he interrupted, annoyed. Although fluent in the lingo of the Far East, he was much too spent now to get his news in a second language. The newswoman's voice muted, replaced by another feminine voice with a Midwestern accent. Japanese subtitles began running across the bottom of the screen. Jason turned on the shower, removing the soiled space diaper from his body. He tossed it into the chrome waste chute compartment on the wall and began adjusting the water temp. The newswoman talked on. Controversy surrounding the recent discovery of a grotesque high-stakes game being played by black market gamers of the Far and Middle East. Nicknamed Gamers in Arms, battle gamers offer up actual human limbs in a contest to see who's best. Battle chairs are mechanically fixed to perform on-the-spot dismemberment of the losing party's limbs, starting with single finger removal each subsequent round, and escalating to the full severing and removal of the entire arm. Sources say that the game seems to have cropped up between rival gamers in an obsessive bid for one-upmanship. The United Nations have called for a ban on this barbarous practice, and local authorities have made it clear its illegality as a first-class felony. At once, the image shrank back into its top-left position on the web vision screen, the bottom right panel growing into prominence. Within the panel was Samako Vance, popular game geek and charismatic host of @Play2K web show. Jason was in the shower now, hot, soothing water cascading down and over his face, body. His sliver streak was now adhered to the bathroom mirror, nothing for him to have peeled a supercomputer off his forearm and flung it onto the viable surface. Vance smiled his cheesy smile as he dished the dirt on the upcoming gaming events to happen in the next 24 hours. Commando VAD Ultraviolence, available for SpacePad 4.0 and own player speed on January 24th, 2055. Hope you enjoyed the sneak peek, guys. Next show, tomorrow, we have special guest, Ravina Nagatomi. Jason's heart skipped at the sound of her name. He leaned against the shower wall, dropping his head, but still listening to the WV. Listening hard. He couldn't help himself. Prodigal legend in the making will be here for a one-on-one interview with, you're looking at him, and we'll be asking all the kinky questions that you fanboys and, I know, fangirls want to know about the sexy gamer goddess from Japan. You know, like, if you were stranded on a desert island with only your WE3D, what 3 games would you have? Or what do you look for in a gaming rival? Or is it true that men who wear Doobie Kong boxers turn you on? Jason finally lifted his head from the tiled wall. He hadn't heard much of what the @Play2K host said past her name. Ravina. The word slithered through his head like a serpent of silk and fire, both heaven and hell to everything it touched. He had told himself that that was all it ever was, a word, but he couldn't stop the trigger effect. He couldn't and could never stop the flood it caused. And then he was 24 years old again and pressing his mouth hard against the lips of a skinny girl that faintly smelled of lemon soap, shampoo, and spring water. Her body squirming beneath his lust-laden weight. His hands were tangled in her straight, black hair, her hands pushing through his mass of tight dreadlocks. She clung to him, greedy in the way she held on to his muscular arms, her head craning up as he planted rough kiss after rough kiss upon her slender neck. His hands groped her waist and hips in a desperate, aching way that those who have experienced virgin desire know as well as oxygen. His senses were open, her panting breaths hulking in his ears, the fresh mountain air seeping in from the window, her flawless, pale skin contrasting with the blackness of his own. They were making out, making love. He wanted this more than anything, even more than being the GGG. He locked eyes with this gorgeous doll of a girl, pushing back thoughts of his minister dad as he ploughed onward, body and spirit. But the words of his father broke through, spoiling his passion. He gazed into the young, unsure eyes of his lover, her innocence and his own, merging with the emasculating words in his head. "Making love for the unwed is just code for making sin, son," his father said. "Making sin." The web monster now switched to the @19571 channel, that CG blue hedgehog streaking around. In that high nasal voice, it was spouting information about the New Year's Eve Omegami Gala, only 24 hours away.
Don't miss the unveiling of the next generation developments and products courtesy of Omegami International, the beginning and end of superior gaming entertainment. Host of this Omega Spectacular will be none other than Omegami CEO Hanzo Nagatomi.
At the sound of his name, Jason felt a phantom throb of pain shoot through his left hand. Slight, the pain traveled fast from his wrist to the tips of his fingers, then gone. He flexed his fingers for a few seconds before leaning back against the shower wall and sliding down to a seated position. The showerhead dispensed a waterfall over him, and he buried his face in his hands as steam rose from the floor. His shoulders sagged, and his heart was throbbing. Grief, jealousy, humiliation, and rage, yes, most of all rage, made his body tremble. No, he would not miss the gala. 9132 Madison Avenue, 8:56 a.m., La Mesa, California, December 31st, 2054. The driver leveled the lanky limo against the curb, the white stretch sedan rolling to a stop. Jason, sitting in the back, pushed the button. The partition separating driver and passenger lowered. The driver looked over his shoulder. 15 minutes, Humberto, Jason said. Gotcha, boss, Humberto replied, giving him a thumbs up. Jason exited the vehicle in his baby blue Gucci suit, a vintage pair of identically colored Air Jordans on his feet. He took a moment to adjust his white tie, speckled with high-res ink logos, and then he straightened his blazer. Taking in a deep breath, he stood on the sidewalk, staring at the front door of his childhood home, only 12 feet away. He then took in another deep breath, deeper than the last and through the nose, and exhaled through his mouth. He walked across the driveway and bounded up the 4 tiny steps to the porch, rang the doorbell. After a moment, Jason saw a silhouette approach through the glass-plated lattice on the door. "Who's knocking?" an accented voice called. "It's Jason." Jason heard the locks being unlocked and the security chain being removed. The door opened. Fatima, Jason's stepmother, stood in the entrance, her face beaming. Even at 50 years old, she didn't look a day over 35. Her long black hair done up in an ornate bun, she wore an elegant dress with a floral print consisting of greens and blues. Fatima looked him over as she pulled the door open as wide as it would go, bringing her arms out. "Champion!" she exclaimed. Jason gave her a sheepish grin as he hugged her tightly. "You never did sell me on that name," he whispered. Fatima leaned away and pinched his cheeks with her fingers. She then chuckled and cupped his face. "I didn't need to. You sold it to the whole world, and you still do not believe it?" "That was a long time ago," he said. "Is Dad around?" Her smile faded a bit. "He's in his study. We missed you during the holidays." Jason pulled Fatima's hands away from his face, looked at the floor. "I'm sorry about that, Yama. I'm uber busy these days." Fatima nodded, then motioned for him to follow. As she led him to his father's study, Jason took note of how tidy the house was. It was more than tidy. It was immaculate. It was obvious to him by the condition of the home that his stepmother had not changed and was therefore taking good care of his father. Jason could still recall the days before Fatima, his beloved Yama, had come into their lives, a time when the home was routinely a pigsty. They came to the door of the personal study of one Pastor Germain Antoine Cord. Fatima made a couple of light raps against the wood, a rich, deep voice ringing out immediately.
Fatima?
"Champion is here," she called back. There was a long pause. Jason had expected this.
"Come in,"
the voice finally said. Fatima opened the door for Jason. He walked in. The study was as simple and orderly as the rest of the house, bookshelves full of books and journals, accompanied by a wooden decor. A large window gave a perfect view of the front yard. Jason found the small room almost criminally antique. Pastor Cord's desk sat almost directly in front of the window. There was the minister, sat with his back to Jason, the Holy Bible opened in front of him, an open binder of scribbles and notes alongside the good book. "I'll leave you, give you two, some privacy," Fatima nodded, closing the door behind her. The door closed, and for the next 2 minutes, neither man said one thing to the other. Jason knew better. He could tell by his father's posture, his glasses on, that he was in the middle of a thought. The pastor was reading. He would not tolerate being interrupted. Jason stood, hands in pockets, waited. And then the minister closed the Bible, closed the binder, removed his reading glasses. "Hi, Dad," Jason said. Pastor Cord swiveled around in his chair and stood up. He looked at his son quizzically before walking over to him and extending his hand. Jason shook it. "Son?" Pastor Cord said. There was another long pause. "What do you need?" Pastor Cord finally said. "You swiped my question." "I asked you first," the pastor countered. Jason walked past his father and strolled over to the window. "I'm fine. You and Yama got any plans for New Year's?" Pastor Cord watched him. "Nothing more than what we usually do. The church rings in New Year's together. Services start at 7 p.m. They end at midnight, like always. And, like always, you're invited, son." Jason shook his head. "I appreciate that, Dad. I really do, but you have other engagements," his father interrupted. "Like always." A pregnant pause. "A gala," Jason spoke up. "Hosted by Omegami International. All the movers and shakers are going to be there." "Where?" "Los Angeles, the Central Arcadina, Cyberlenium." Pastor Cord took a couple of paces toward his son, folded his arms. "What do you need?" he asked Jason again. Jason took a deep breath. "I need prayers." His father looked him in the eye. "I pray for you every day, Jason. Every single day." Jason broke eye contact. He turned his attention back to the window outlooking the front yard. The sprinklers shot on and began watering Fatima's beautiful begonias. "Not for my salvation. For my life. For this life. For tonight." Pastor Cord placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You aren't talking about that Nagatomi girl, are you?" Jason didn't answer. Pastor Cord shook his head, grabbed Jason by both shoulders. "Have you forgotten what happened all those years ago? I haven't, and your Yama hasn't either. We nearly lost you because of those people. Nearly lost you because of those stupid games." Jason pulled away from his father. "It's different now, Dad. I'm different. Not naive, weak, or helpless like I was. I'm gonna make things right." The pastor shook his head in annoyance. "You know what the good book says about vengeance, Jason." "This isn't about vengeance, Dad. It's about justice." "Potato, potato." Pastor Cord walked to the door of his study, opened it. "I've raised you once already. I can only do it once." "Will you pray for me?" Jason asked. The pastor nodded. "I'll pray that the good Lord takes the bitterness out of your heart and gives you the strength to leave the past in the past. It's the best I can do for you." Jason nodded. "Happy New Year, Dad," he said, and left the room. Outside, the limo was still idle when Jason returned to it. As he slid into the back seat, his sliver streak sounded off. He pulled up his sleeve to check the notification. "Everything apples, boss?" Humberto the driver asked. "Yeah," Jason said, his eyes on the screen of his SS. His heart hiccuped in his throat as he read the news headline flashing on the screen. Breaking news. Shooter gaming champion Ravina Nagatomi arrives at Play 2K Studios for live interview. Jason pulled his sleeve back down over his SS. "Humberto, take me to high-res headquarters, please. Downtown LA. Humberto nodded, put the sedan in drive, and pulled off. As the car went into motion, Jason imagined his pastor father watching him leave from the large window of his study. He imagined his father whispering a prayer to God for his safety. But that was all that it was. Imagination. Jason had never bothered to look back. Arcadina. A stadium-sized arena designed to house virtual video gaming contests and/or tournaments of various genres and sizes. The term itself was originally derived from the mismashing of the words arcade and arena, a slang word that rose to popularity via social media during the early 2030s, when some of the first arcadinas were built. These virtual battlefields are efficiently equipped to house thousands of physical spectators and tournament players. The virtual technology within its facilities is the best the industry has to offer, with key venues available all over the world. Jason thought about many things as he began making the necessary arrangements for the gala. So much had changed in the world in such little time. Change was all that existed now. Change and innovation. Innovation. That is what had saved him from being a crippled has-been at a mere 25 years of age, what had saved his floundering gaming development company Hi-Res Inc. during its infant years. And because of these, he was sure it would be the same thing to keep him afloat in the foreseeable future. It was, and had always been, an integral part of his success. And this was something his minister father could never understand. Not that Jermaine Cord never tried. Jason pitied him, a man who still believed in God in a world that only believed in gaming mascots, developers, and avatar skins. He was a man stuck in a bygone era, clinging to a faith that science was gnawing into oblivion by the nanosecond. The current population had long grown disinterested in a magical road to the afterlife. They were pursuers of hyperlife, the perpetual existence of both here and now, and one that ran on leaderboards, achievement trophies, and downloadable content to thrive. In this world, technology was the undisputed master of the universe, and Jason's dear minister of a father had missed the notification. Jason, on the other hand, had carved a place for himself within the kingdom of techno-deity, a habitation paved with his very own soul. The desire, the thrill of the play had entered his heart at an early age, and even now, at the age of 32, it remained a stalwart motivator. Such a motivation had led him to becoming the greatest gamer gaming, the GGG, at 23 years old, a nigh insurmountable feat that pitted him against one Ravina Nagatomi in the finals of the World All-Genre Gaming Tournament of 2045. The championship title had been on the line, the previous year's champion, Marshall Mars Cates, having been eliminated in the semi-finals by Ravina herself. Jason had won the coin toss to decide the game through which the final battle would take place. He had chosen a new but extremely popular game at the time, Nimbus. It was a virtual first-person shooter, one that Jason had spent every waking hour mastering during the months leading up to the tournament. He would later come to learn his opponent had done the same. The two of them had faced off, putting their respective skills against one another in a best 5 out of 7 match. When the smoke cleared, Jason Cord had been declared the winner. But he would never again be the same. Ravina, his beautiful adversary, had changed him. Cyberlenium. The premier Arcadina within the United States and one of the 5 most popular Arcadinas globally. Located in Los Angeles, it was first opened in 2034 and was funded by the Omegami Corporation. The property acquired was formerly the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, a massively luxurious mother church of Roman Catholic origin. The postmodern elements of the original architectural structure of the church were maintained, including, but not limited to, the cathedral's bronze doors, alabaster windows, and tapestry-lined walls. The facility had to be partially renovated following the Los Angeles earthquake of 2047, and was elaborated on in 2053 with various improvements. The gaming stadium can hold up to 13,000 people to capacity and operates on a 24-hour, 7-day weekly schedule. 555 West Temple Street, 10:55 p.m., Los Angeles, California, December 31st, 2054. The 40-degree weather had not deterred the gaming community, nor the entertainment community. It never has, and it never would on this night of all nights. New Year's Eve, and less than 2 hours away from 2055. The future was waiting. Jason's limo pulled up near the entrance of the Arcadena's bronze-plated doors, massive swarms of people flooding the surrounding lobby. It had taken nearly 3 hours for the drive, the traffic relentless. But Jason had needed that time. The late arrival allowed him to avoid seeing her. She and the rest of the elite would have made their mandatory public appearances and announcements by now, and would be mingling together on the 13th floor. His personal assistant and part-time bodyguard, Celestia, called Sally for short, sat in the limo with him, quiet and resolute. And though he had shared some of his plans for her during the long ride to Cyberlenium, plans that would irrevocably alter the very nature of her existence, resolute she remained. For beneath her business-elegant gown, pale skin, chic eyeliner, and Irish lilt, she was, after all, a machine, an Omega droid. The paparazzi, gamerheads, and superfans crowded around the limo, straining to steal a peek at who was inside. Jason fumbled with his tie as he peered out of the tinted windows, lamenting the swelling crowd ready to block their path. Sally watched him as he watched them, her face quizzical. "Should I remain here, sir?" Sally asked. "Come with me," Jason said. "I may need you before I need you. Sense?" Sally nodded. Jason hit the button and lowered the partition. "Park at the back exit and wait for us, Humberto. If we don't show by 10 after midnight, go home." "Yes, sir," Humberto the driver replied. Jason called and Sally exited the stretch, the mob converging on them at once. Fans and reporters alike thrust their headset cameras and sliver streaks in their direction, filming he and his android companions' every movement. Thousands of questions were asked and went unanswered as Jason took Sally by the hand and pushed his way to the entrance. The enforcers, law-approved Omega droid models, moved in when Jason flashed his industry badge, providing cover for the two as they made it inside the Arcadena. Once Jason's nano ID, embedded beneath the skin of his forearm, was scanned at the clearance checkpoint, the two of them stepped out of line and waited. Jason texted a message on his SS. As more gamerheads moved through security, he realized he did not recognize a single face. Why would he? The last time he had been involved in any public playing tournaments was around 46. The better part of a decade in the real world might as well have been the better part of a century in the gaming world. New games always begat even newer gamers, and newer gamers made the fans forget the old ones. But Jason did not care, or at least that is the lie he told his rational mind. The incident had happened to him that very year, 2046, and the solution had come at a terrible cost. Irreplaceable things were lost in that terrible moment, and from that moment onward, everything was leading to this night. "I'll be damned! You were serious!" Jason looked over to see a tall, suave man approaching him, dressed in a tuxedo. He was a handsome man of Jason's age, his sly grin and albino features making him hard to look away from. He ran his fingers through his pale hair before extending his fist. "I thought you were shying me," he said. "Jay, old friend." The two bumped fists. "Good to see you, Frankie," Jason smiled. Jason turned and gestured at Sally. "This is my assistant, Celestia. I call her Sally. She's not really a she, huh?" Frankie interrupted, chuckled. "Did you think I would be fooled because of the skin?" "Someday soon you will be," Jason retorted. Well, that'll be a cold day in Raccoon City. But if you can make that happen, I'd welcome it. The real thing is too toxic to tame. Frankie shook Sally's hand. If you didn't introduce her as an assistant, I would have assumed new doll. Frankie laughed at his own words, but Jason said nothing. Let me take you two to the VIP room. Frankie nodded. As the trio walked the hall toward the elevators, Jason tried to keep his head down. He did not want anyone to recognize him. Sally followed close behind Jason and Frankie, swiftly scanning each passerby as they walked. There were just as many cosplayers as there were elegantly dressed celebrity entertainers and personalities. At the elevator, Frankie pushed the button and waited. How's the hand? He asked Jason. That phantom tinge of pain, the dreaded ghost in the shell, throbbed through Jason's fingers at the mere mention of it. He shook it off, flexing the fingers on his left hand. Great. The elevator opened, and a gang of cosplayers dressed like the blue CG hedgehog got off. The three of them entered the elevator, and Frankie pushed 9. Whether or not the comment made by Frankie was a dig, Jason could not tell, but the question he asked in return was earnest. You and Amelia didn't make it? Frankie answered without looking at him. Ghosted me as soon as we had Zen. Left the same day we brought her home from the bloody hospital.
Zen? Sally asked.
My daughter, Frankie continued. She's the light of my life. Correction, she is my life. Sally spoke.
Are you referring to Zen Casper as in Zulene Lays Nicole Casper? Born in the year 2042. Parents are Franklin Robert Casper and Amelia Van Sant. Child prodigy and current champion of...
I'm sorry to hear that. Jason interjected, cutting Sally off. She did her job well enough. Frankie sighed. Gave me my baby. I shan't complain. The elevator doors opened. The trio stepped out into the 9th floor hallway, a series of strobe lights above them flickering. House metal music boomed through the area, and Jason could tell the source was coming from a large room down the hall. The VIP room. This way, Frankie motioned. As they moved along the hallway, Jason watched partygoers come and go past them. They were of a different caliber than the average gamerheads, sophisticated and nuanced. They all moved with an air of secret agenda and calculation. And, much like Jason now, though they appeared to be in the gaming industry, they were not necessarily of it. Inside the VIP room, a clashing of cultures was on full display. Gargantuan WebMonster XL TVs streaming tournaments hung from the ceilings. Small gaming rooms for players to play various virtual games were fixed in every corner of the room, and tables were available for drinking spectators. Had it not been for several members of the Yakuza being present at those tables, Jason would have had no indication that he was about to engage in black market activity. Jason whispered in his assistant's ear, Kill mode, Sally. Full alert. Sally nodded. You want to meet Zen? Frankie asked. Before the meeting? Jason raised his sleeve and peeked at the time on his sliver streak. It read 11:16 p.m. Before he could answer, Frankie called out, Z, baby! A small, skinny girl emerged from one of the virtual gaming booths across the room. She ran towards the trio awkwardly, her sprinting throwing her off balance. As she came closer, Jason could see that she was wearing a white and red jumpsuit with Axelis 9 tennis shoes. It was an obvious homage to the outfit Ravina had worn in the tournament finals back in 45. The semi-translucent mask she was wearing, however, was its own thing. The mask covered and obscured most of her face, with only her eyes, lips, and chin visible. Both her hair and skin matched her father's. She stared up at Jason, her light grey eyes searching. She was short for a 12-year-old. Hello, Zen, Jason said. Frankie knelt beside his daughter, placed a hand on her shoulder. This is an old friend, Z, baby. His name is Jay. Say hi.
Do you have to call me a baby in public, Dad?
You're right, sweetie. Daddy's sorry. Zen waved at Jason.
Hi.
Go back to your game, Frankie said. Zen ran back to the gaming booth. Frankie stood to his feet, his gaze still in his daughter's direction. She brought home a stray when she was 7, Frankie began. It was a Yorkshire Terrier. Z loved the cute, scruffy thing. God knows where it had been. Wherever it had been, though, it brought back hell on its tongue. Licked Zen all over her beautiful nose, beautiful face. He dropped his head, shoved his hands in his pockets. Whatever the dog's tongue touched rotted, died, and fell off. The bacteria ate away my baby girl's beautiful face. The video games became the solution. Jason shook his head, said nothing. Sally was silent as well. These games give her something to be great at, and she is great. And that greatness distracts her from looking in the mirror. Of course, I had to put the dog to sleep. Jason had heard long ago about his friend's daughter's disfigurement, but he was much too respectful to ever ask him about it directly. Neither would he have ever sought the information from indirect sources like the paparazzi or the numerous media vampires. Jason placed his hand on Frankie's shoulder. It was all he could offer. There were no words for such a senseless tragedy, a type of tragedy that Jason himself knew all too well. But, as unfortunate as Frankie's story was to hear, it reminded him of his own mission. "Let's get this over with," Jason said. The Yakuza, the black market, black-suited men of the hour, barely spoke English. While this was not a hindrance for Jason Cord and his android assistant, Frankie needed a translator to understand business with the gangsters. Jason allowed Sally to translate for his friend. It was the least he could do, as Frankie had used his own business connections overseas to help him arrange the illegal meeting in the first place. The leader and largest of the gangsters, Sato Hayabusa, produced a small, gunmetal-colored attaché case. He opened it to reveal 3 nanodrives, all 3 no bigger than a US quarter. Platinum token vessels storing trillions of nanobytes of information. "What exactly are they?" Frankie questioned.
Nanomachine interfaces, Sally explained. Each drive, a separate interface, fulfilling a certain function. 360-degree holographic manifestation, neural recall, and neural sensitivity. The trio of interfaces can be used to create—
"Wait," Frankie whispered. "Can the holographic interface be digitally transposed over living skin?" "How much?" Jason asked the gangster. $1 million, US, Hayabusa said. Frankie looked at Jason. "Jay, this is what I've been looking for, searching for ever since Zen's accident. It's a way to fix her face. It's a way to let the world see her how she should really be seen. A bloody miracle." Jason shook his head. "This isn't for Zen, Frankie. This is for someone I owe my life to. I owe this to them." "Who?" Frankie yelled. Though Jason saw the confusion in the eyes of his friend, he hesitated. "Ravina," Jason finally said. "What does Nagatomi have to do with this? She's apples. And she's here, upstairs, with the elites. She'll understand. She loves me and she loves Zen. And she still loves you, Jay. I know she does. Not after Japan." Frankie pulled at his hair. "Japan? We were kids, and that was almost a decade ago." Jason shook his head again. Frankie did not understand. No one would ever understand. $1.5 million, Frankie blurted out to the gangsters. "I'll take it for $1.5 million. At this, the gangsters began to murmur among themselves. Jason tried to shove Frankie away from the table, but Frankie caught his balance. The friends got nose to nose. Sally did not move, but watched Frankie intensely. "A bidding war is a losing battle for you, Frankie?" Jason laughed, bitterness in his voice. "High-res is worth a heck of a lot more than whatever you think you have." "You sure?" Frankie retorted. "I can have 6.5 million wired within 60 seconds. I can wire them 10 million in those same 60 seconds. Frankie's face changed. "All Zen needs is the one interface, Jason. The holographic one. Let me purchase that one. You keep the other 2. Sally spoke to the gangsters in Japanese. The men agreed. "No!" Jason yelled, slamming his fist on the table. "This is not a compromise or a negotiation. The deal is set. I'm not walking away without all 3. Jason saw Frankie's eyes and could see their friendship, their brotherhood, eroding. Hayabusa pondered for only a moment, and then addressed Sally. Jason Cord was not listening, too busy watching the love in his friend's eyes wither to hate. Sully spoke. The Yakuza are willing to sell the entire set to either of you, but the price is now $16 million, the sum of both bids. They suggest a single gaming match to settle the score. Winner takes the set. The Yakuza, the money. Frankie smiled. Well, old friend, looks like we're putting it all on the line. Like the golden era. How unpracticed are you these days, eh? Jason found the contempt in his former friend's voice nauseating. You lose again, Frankie. I've never been your equal, but your superior, no matter the game. Who said I was playing? Frankie chuckled. Zen! Frankie's skinny, awkward, and disfigured daughter came sprinting back over to the table. She answered her father, though her eyes stayed on Jason.
Yes, Dad?
Frankie knelt beside his daughter, once again placing a hand on her shoulder. As he spoke, both looked Jason in the eyes. You and my old friend are going to play a game. It's a very, very important one. It involves a very bright future for you and Daddy, so we mustn't lose. Okay?
Okay.
Zen nodded. Hayabusa murmured to Sully. Sully spoke up. The Yakuza play for blood. Skin must always be in the game. Gamers in arms rules. The loser not only forfeits the money and the interfaces, but an arm as well. Don't do this, Frankie, Jason pleaded. Please. Frankie stood up. No worries. I told you Zen was great, and I meant it. She knows what loss is. Now there's only wins to be had. He extended his hand to Jason. May the greatest gamer gaming win. Omega Droid. Armed android officers used for security within the gaming industry, initially for Arcadinas, and manufactured by the Omegami Corporation. The first prototypes date back as far as the year 2042, but the official standard models were not approved and commissioned until 2048. The United Nations approved the sanction of the inaugural models under global law, following the ruling of the Cord versus Omegami lawsuit of 2047, while referencing similar incidents such as the Jacksonville landing shooting of 2018. In recent years, purchasing rights have expanded to include the private sector, with customizable weapons, directives, and 180-degree holographic avatar skin options available to the most affluent in and out of industry. Zen Casper won the coin toss. The adolescent chose her favorite game, Nimbus 3. To Jason, it was no surprise. The franchise series was Ravina's specialty, and this little girl was bent on following in her footsteps. She could not have chosen a better idol at a worse time. On the 12th floor, the loading room was not as Jason had remembered it in his 20s. It was less cluttered. The several cables and mother boxes of yesteryear were gone. The room was neat and orderly, a completely wireless and anti-box environment of fluorescent lights and neon-walled paneling. 2 loading chairs sat facing one another in the middle of the room, the necessary accoutrements already attached to 2 of the 4 armrests. Jason eyed the 4 miniature buzzsaws and hypodermic needles on each one, every single one sharpened to a point and shiny. A couple of gangsters ushered both Jason and Zen into the room. No one else was allowed to be present during the game. The 2 opponents sat down in their contraptions and were strapped in. A single match, best 2 out of 3 rounds, one of the gangsters said. My left, Jason's voice trailed off, faltered. I need a bionic-friendly master trigger. Polymesh steel, gamma grade. The second gangster nodded and left the room. Jason took note that although the Yakuza claimed to not speak English, they seemed to understand it well enough. Why? Zen asked Jason. He answered the young girl while looking at his hand. Because if I don't have one, we won't be able to play each other. That's not a real answer, she said. Take it or leave it. He smirked. The gangster returned with 2 master triggers, one standard, the other, the augmented version requested. Jason eyed the G-grade, cursing himself silently. He should have brought his own. The button density of his own trigger had already been broken in. It would have responded in kind to his subtle button presses and split-second combos with baffling synchronicity. It would have been like an old woman catching the scent of her first love's aftershave. But the G-grade in front of him looked fresh out of the box. Jason would not at all be surprised if it had been shipped the day after Christmas. As the gangsters prepared the virtual reality headsets, Jason stole a glance at Zen. The girl only stared back at him, her eyes searching with curiosity. He looked away.
My dad doesn't know it, but I know who you are,
Zen whispered.
Or rather, I know who you were.
This caused Jason to look at her face. If that's true, then why would you take the risk? Zen giggled.
The thrill of the play, I guess. You had to be coursed someday. Why not me?
Apples and vibes, kid, Jason said.
No worries, Mr. J.
Zen nodded back.
I slays at this game.
The Yakuza placed on their headset visors. There was a surge of power, and then the real world melted away, went black. And then there was light. The players gripped their master triggers with both hands as they were transported to the virtual world. Skipping over the fancy title screens, they went straight to work, perusing the character select menus. 13 seconds was all it took to select mechs and customize weaponry. Not a thought process, but muscle memory, reflex, instinct. Grandmother Cord would have described it as like riding a bike or knowing the back of her hand. And then the match began. Venue, a desert setting. Colosseum-style pillars circled the killing ground. A sandstorm. 2 armored mechs stood 10 feet away from each other, poised for battle. Jason's mech's chrome was a blue tint, Zen a pink one. Ravina Nagatomi's preferred color. The virtual faces of each player were visible to each other through the mech visors. The sandstorm picked up as a digitized announcer's words cut the air.
Nimbus 3 match commencing. Jason Cord versus Zen Casper. Round 1. Ready?
So much had changed in the world in such little time. Go! Zen charged Jason at once, the rocket boosters on her mech legs propelling her forward at alarming speed. Her plasma sword flared, sprouting from her robot hand. Jason sidestepped, dodging the slashing attack at the last moment. Zen reset herself, charged again. Jason took note of her speed and accuracy, silently praising her efforts as he sidestepped the second attack. He then baited the girl to chase him around the killing ground for several more of her attacks, but some of those attacks started landing. Jason's fingers glided frantically over the buttons of his master trigger, moving so fast that the evasion combos he inputted barely registered. He looked at their respective health gauges, visible in the upper right corner of his field of vision. Blue mech, 37%. Pink mech, 100%. As the blue mech dashed forward, the pink mech released a volley of energy bullets that perforated its opponent's metallic shell. The blue mech staggered backwards, swayed, and then collapsed into a heap on the ground, its health gauge depleting to 0. The digitized announcer's voice boomed.
Zen wins. Seraph kill.
Seraph kill. In the world of Nimbus, Seraph kills are considered a win of the highest magnitude. It is achieved by a player depleting their mech adversary's health gauge to 0%, while simultaneously taking 0% damage to their own mech shell.
Crusty rusty, Mr. J?
Zen asked between giggles. Crusty rusty, a slang term Nimbus game fanatics use to taunt fellow players after a poor performance, specifically after the losing party plays around, failing to successfully launch an offense. The origin stems from the dictionary meaning of the word crusty, which is a fried dough that is sometimes referred to as angel wings. The term is an in-game joke that loosely translates as useless angel wings, a reference to the titular mechs of the franchise, who are canonically mechanized guardian angels assigned to protect humanity from the interstellar demon known as Azul. Jason took the dig in silence. He only mashed at his buttons repeatedly, attempting to loosen up the stiffness of his master trigger in preparation for the next round. A round he now could not afford to lose. The blue mech lumbered back to its feet, dust being kicked up as the announcer called out,
Jason Cord versus Zen Casper. Round 2. Ready?
Jason glanced at his weapons cache in the lower left corner of his field of vision. His fingers moved swiftly, gliding over the master trigger's buttons with the dexterity of Hendrix Batiste. His cursor stopped on Flamethrower Cannon. Go! The blue mech launched a stream of flame at the pink mech. The pink mech dodged the attack at once, then started a strafing arc trajectory toward her opponent. Jason saw the plan. She's trying to get in close. But the blue mech began taking aim at the surrounding space closest to him, dousing it in fire. The pink mech barely stopped her approach in time to avoid the damage. The blue mech continued to launch flames around itself, creating a wall of fire that rose high into the storm-plagued troposphere. This confused the player of the pink mech, who simply kept a safe distance away from the firewall. The timer, the allotted 60 seconds allowed for gameplay given each round, dwindled down. The pink mech waited anxiously, not daring to get close to the blue mech.
"You're about to lose, Mr. J,"
Zen whispered.
"I've already won the first round. If neither of us has taken any damage when the clock strikes 0, I win."
Jason said nothing. The blue mech continued to create a firewall with his cannon. His palms began to sweat, but he dared not wipe them, lest his plan go awry. 10 seconds left. 6 seconds. One chance. With a blurring flick of his fingers, Jason switched to his mech's secondary long-range weaponry, heat-seeking bullets. The burst attack shot out from the blue mech's wrist instantly, traveling through the firewall left by the cannon only seconds earlier. The pink mech dodged the trio of bullets successfully. Zen exhaled, laughed.
"You lose, mister."
3 seconds. The bullets changed direction. Zen saw it. Reflex. The pink mech attempted to strafe left, but one of the bullets grazed its shoulder. The timer hit 0. Blue mech, 100%. Pink mech, 98%. The announcer's voice boomed again.
Time's up. Jason wins.
"Green eggs and spam sandwich!"
Zen screamed, her skin flushing deep red. The announcer drowned out her swearing.
Jason Cord versus Zen Casper. Final round. Ready? Go!
The round began just as Jason Cord predicted. The pink mech charged her blue-tinted adversary, a raging bull looking to gore the matador. Zen was looking to avenge her loss of the last round. It had been embarrassing, humiliating. She would not tolerate being outperformed. And so, the pink mech chased the blue one without mercy. As Jason's mech took damage with each of Zen's successful attacks, the girl gained confidence, resolve. And this was by design. Jason wanted the hope within her to grow as high as possible. He did this in the prayer, yes, prayer, that, in the end, there would be enough left of that hope, enough left of the thrill of the play for Zen Casper to build a future with. The pink mech released a volley of energy bullets. The blue mech strafed away, rolling along the ground, dodging the volley at will. Sparks trailed the tumbling blue mech as it continued to slip the barrage, dirt and dust being kicked into the air. Coming out of the tumble, he used his leg boosters to start a strafing arc trajectory around the pink mech. The blue mech raised his arm, a hand cannon ejecting from his wrist. The trigger finger was pulled, releasing a hail of heat-seeking bullets that struck the pink mech directly in the chest. The resulting explosion knocked her several feet into the air. She landed onto her back. The pink mech then staggered to its feet, stunned. The opening. The blue mech dashed forward, a plasma sword materializing in his hand. Arms thrown backward, the mech closed the gap while his sword flared. The pink mech powered up her own plasma sword just in time to block the blue mech's downward slash. The swords clanged, grated, and burned against one another. The mechs became locked in the kill zone, an energy-driven tug-of-war by which only one player could prevail. Jason glanced at the health gauges. Blue mech, 54%. Pink mech, 51%. The swords grated, burned hotter. The gauges continued to deplete. Blue mech, 33%. Pink mech, 37%. Zen started laughing, crying too.
"I'm gonna beat you!
Blue mech, 11%. Pink mech, 13%.
I'm the greatest!"
Blue mech, 7%. Pink mech, 8%. And then For only a nanosecond, Jason was 24 years old again, being dragged out onto the patio deck, clothed in nothing but his underwear. Ravina, naked, screaming in Japanese, hysterical, inconsolable. Nagatomi-san yelling, furious. The bodyguard stretched Jason's hand out onto the gravel. His dominant hand, the hand that made him the GGG. Ravina begged. Her uncle Hanzo, Nagatomi-san, immune to her cries. The katana, the pain, the love, everything lost in Japan. But the player of the blue mech found Providence. Jason Cord waited for his assistant Selly at the elevator on the 12th floor. He raised his bloodied sleeve to check the time on his sliver streak. He could hear the masses outside and all throughout the facility counting down, the reverberation of their collective voices rumbling the stadium. The clock hit midnight just as the elevator doors opened.
Happy New Year!
Everyone cheered. Frankie Casper shot out of the elevator and past Jason, sprinting down the hall like a wild man. Several elites shuffled off the elevator behind him, leaving Selly waiting in the elevator alone. She was carrying the small gunmetal attaché case. Jason stepped into the elevator alongside her. He pushed button 8. As the doors closed, Frankie let out an awful, droning yowl. It did not sound human. As the elevator descended, Selly spoke.
Are you injured?
Jason looked at her, then finally noticed the blood staining the sleeve of his blazer. No, he said. Both could hear the fireworks going off outside, the thunderous booming echoing through the walls. The elevator stopped on the 8th floor. When the doors opened, Jason grabbed Selly by the hand and led her out through a group of people waiting to get on. Come on, Jason said. He led her down the hall to the men's restroom. They went inside. Once Jason confirmed that they were alone, he jammed the door. He took the attaché case from Selly's hands, placed it on the sink counter, and opened it. He gazed at the 3 nanodrives lying inside, the 3 drives he committed several felonies for, including one that resulted in the dismemberment of a minor, then looked at Selly. This is the moment, Selly. What we talked about. I know, she said. No, you don't. Ravina's uncle was against us. Didn't trust Gaijin. Jason gazed into the bathroom mirror, focusing on the blood on his sleeve. We were young and careless. When he caught us, Jason showed Selly his left hand. Took my fingers, most of my hand. Lawsuit settlements and cybernetics eventually restored function, but I never saw Ravina alive again. Selly stared quizzically.
Ravina Nagatomi is here at Cyberlenium, upstairs, with other elites. You can go to her.
Jason Cord placed his palms over his eyes, pushed the tears away. Aokijihara is where I found the body. The Sea of Trees. She quit playing their game, but Omegami International covered it up. The company has been using a body double since 2046. Jason caressed Selly's face. Now all that I have left is her ghost, haunting these drives. And her ghost needs a shell.
Yes, sir,
Selly said. Jason pulled his assistant closer, his hands on her face. Call me Jason, he murmured. Jason's eyes then went to the open attaché case. Nagatomi-san and Omegami must pay for what they did to her. To us. And it starts with you, Selly. Are you prepared to be the change I need to see in this world? Selly placed her hands on top of Jason's, her eyes wide, searching.
Oh, Jason.
Outside, the raucous and drunken guffaws of the newborn year echoed throughout the city streets. With fireworks and confetti in the air, the gamerheads, cosplayers, celebrity guests, and dregs for 200 blocks showed no signs of fatigue. The worship services of the techno deity reigned supreme. At 9 minutes after midnight, a backdoor exit of the local Arcadina known as Cyberlenium, the Church of Gaming, opened. 2 lovers emerged, one a man, the other a ghost in the machine. Players in crime, they escaped into a white stretch sedan. their unlikely reunion having left blood on the playground.